There we go. She heard me. And then we'll turn it over to our esteemed presenters from GED Testing Service. Liz, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. I quit messing around with the screen, Liz. Yeah.
So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for inviting us to be with you today. I am Liz Lanfear. I'm the State Relationship Manager for South Dakota. And so what that means is that I am your support person. I meet often with Kristen as the GED administrator for the state. And I want to be able to be a support person to all of you in the field. We have tons of resources that can help you improve as teachers, ways to reach out and pull students in and increase your enrollments, ways to streamline education so that you get quicker outcomes and you're more likely to keep those students, all sorts of things. And this one was set up to be more focused on question and answers. So we want to hear from you. But if any of those topics are things that you wanted to hear about, just reach out to me anytime and we can do a one-on-one, or each program I could do some PD with you guys and hit those topics as well. So if we miss anything, just let me know and I'm always here for you. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Debbie Fawcett. She's going to do the bulk of the slides. If there are things that we need to move out to the live websites for, I'll drive on that part. Well, yeah, I'll be able to share, I think.
You can share. Yeah.
And we'll just kind of go that route. And I do need to just apologize is that I have another PD session right after this. So I'll leave a couple minutes early. But Debbie will tie it up for you. And again, my contact information will be at the end and just reach out anytime.
Okay, thanks, Liz. And for those of you who could see, it looked like my Halloween blinking lights, which sometimes happens with a power surge that we have around here. So that's why I'm going to go off screen to do the presentation. And Liz hit the nail on the head. When we talked about this, sort of what we're offering you today is a little bit of a smorgasbord of here's a bunch of different topics. And as we go through them, you're going to see that either Liz or I could spend 30 to 40 minutes on any one of these things. That's not what you're interested in today. This is your chance to ask us questions if there are things you need to know. And so, as you can see here, let me see this. Yep, you know who we are. We've been around. I've been around a lot longer than Liz. She's a young person up beside me, but we both have lots of experience in adult ed. So we can cover any of the questions you want. In my mind, the way I think of the resources and the tools and the things that we have kind of fits in three buckets. As I go out and I do professional development, we get questions about the actual test content in the 4 content areas that you see listed there. So yes, we'll answer a lot of those for you. Then I look at what I consider important instructional tools, and we have a lot of those to discuss. And then another section is teacher and student resources, which are a little different from just purely instructional tools. So what we're going to do today is we're going to show you some of the bullets that we think fit under these categories. Then we're going to get all the way to the one that says Q&A, and then we're going to just open it up to you all and let you start asking us some questions. For example, I put a few bullet points. We do a lot of PD. These are some of the questions that come up across content areas, and sometimes they're specific. You know, how do I determine what content to cover? You know, people say, gosh, there's so much in social studies. Where do I begin? Or they worry about how much of math is algebra. And the RLA, we always get those discussions between the technology enhanced items versus the extended response. So take a second and look at some of these that we can talk about, or I'm hoping these questions help you go, oh yeah, there was something I wanted to know related to one of the areas that you see listed here. You know, we say what's most challenging for students. That's because when Marty Kay was with us for the many years as vice president, it drove him crazy for us to say, what are the most missed items? But I think it kind of goes without saying that if it's the most challenging, it's the ones they're having the most trouble with. We hear a lot about this, and it goes from season to season. For a couple of years, we had people telling us, what'd y'all do to the science test? I heard it's a lot harder now. And then that moved off. Now we're hearing things about social studies. So any of the urban myths or urban legends that are out there about the test, what we've done to it, what we're going to do to it, this is your chance in a, open forum to ask some of those questions. All right. Look at what I consider instructional tools, and I break it into two categories. The things that are actually about your classroom instruction are the first 5 bullet points, the assessment guide for educators. If you don't know what it is, we need to learn it. Within that are the performance level descriptors. Then you have the official practice test. That is an instructional tool. And the other instructional tool that feeds into that is the score report that you gain from the practice test or the exam, the actual test. And then we also have lots of professional development opportunities on the website, either under our webinars or the multitude of recordings that are on our YouTube page under GED testing service. Some other equally important tools I consider more operational, but it's the tools you need to be using every day, such as GED Manager, Prep Connect, if that is something you can avail yourselves of. And we can talk a little bit about the excitement we have with our My GED mobile app. All right. Then the third bucket are things that are really necessary resources for teachers and students. And I think the first thing that we consider a necessary resource that teachers and students need to be aware of are the accommodations guidelines or the computer tutorial, free computer tutorial, the free calculator tutorial. If you've been around a long time, you're sick of hearing us talk about this, but we get new people in all the time. And if the new people don't know that, and this is my personal opinion, not GED's opinion, but I think we are negligent as educators if we don't make sure our students go through the computer tutorial, the calculator tutorial, and the free practice test and those test taking tools, because all of those are things you do not want them, you want them to be comfortable with the computer, the calculator, the makeup, the presentation of the test, and so forth. The last thing I want a student to be spending thinking time on, how do I move the mouse? How do I get to this? How do I shade this? I want them thinking about the questions that they're reading and answering. We can help them be comfortable with everything else with those 4 bullets right after the accommodations guidelines. Then you also know that free practice we have on the student study guides. And again, another resource, any way you look at it, is the mobile app. So that is our laundry list of all the different things we would love to answer your questions about or just have a discussion about. So that being said, I'm going to pull it back to this slide, and I don't care what you ask for underneath there. We're ready to go if any of you have any questions. So can we open it up?
So I actually have a question, Debbie, that came up. John Anderson and I were doing some training together. I think this is where I got this question. Somebody asked, well, it's been about 10 years since the last version of the GED came out. Are we going to be seeing a new GED test soon?
Mhm.
And my response was, I honestly kind of feel like we might not see new GED tests again because with the computer adaptive, I think
Yeah.
you all are able to make some of those adjustments as we go. Am I correct in that, or is my thinking flawed?
No, your thinking is absolutely on target, and thank you for sharing that answer with them. Because, yeah, you're absolutely right. We had to change it every 10 years because it was a hard stop in paper that could not be adjusted along the way. There, we see no reason for a hard stop to come, because the only way that would happen is if the Department of Education, Octay, or the Division of Adult Ed would do some major cataclysmic changes, sort of like what we saw. One of the reasons we got so far behind, think of the old 2002 version of the test. Well, what was happening in the late 1990s into the early 2000s? High school redesign. All the standards were being ramped up. We had a paper test that we had no way to modify because it wasn't going to be printed any different way. We had made 3 forms. That's all we used for 12 years. And that's how we got behind. That's why there was such a big change in 2014. We knew we had to adapt and catch up. Now that we're on computer-based, we monitor what's happening in Octay. Unless we see some huge change in standards, there is no reason to make any hard stop. Bottom line is, you all are aware that we do minimal field testing so that we can constantly refresh our item banks. And in those field testings, if there's any shift or changes that are minimal, still within the frame of Octay's guidelines, we're good. So we can do the minor tweaks as needed unless there's a huge change. And that would be something so huge that you'd recognize it from Octay, then you could probably know to expect it from the testing service. A long way to saying good work, Becky.
Well, I think from our standpoint, it's just great to hear because there's so much stress for students and teachers and programs when those big changes happen. I went through a couple of them, and
Yeah.
they're no fun at all.
Yeah, nope, not at all. Not at all. So, all right, Becky was the first brave soul up. Anybody else have something you want to talk about, complain, or explain?
I'm curious, when it comes to the science test, there is no longer any short answer, correct? It's all
Correct.
okay. And then when it comes to the reasoning essay, it really doesn't matter which side of the argument they choose. It depends on how they handle it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll just a little bit of the history in case the students, or other educators want to ask. Back in 2014, we had writing in social studies, we had writing in science, and we had writing the extended response in RLA. We first deleted the social studies because what our researchers and content analysts realized was we were not learning anything different about the writing and the responses and their ability to analyze and evaluate by doing both a social studies and an RLA. So why make them 2 exercises if we already were gaining the insights we needed from just the one? So the social studies was the first one to drop away in 2015, 2016. Then the science were 2 short answers. And for the same reason, it was determined that it had to do with the length of the test and honestly the scoring of the test, because when you're scoring written responses, that's a little different bailiwick. Everything that we were gleaning from the short answers in science, we were testing for the same concepts in the technology enhanced. So again, we were repeating something that we already knew as much about it as we needed to, and the students were being tested on the same type of content. So that one went away. Now, I will tell you, if you look in, I can't remember if it's the assessment guide for educators or one, I think it is the assessment guide, isn't it, Liz, that there is still a reference to the short answers. And I will tell you, they kept it in there because at the time they took out those short answers, it says, well, we're taking a break from them for the current time. We don't know if we'll keep them out forever, so we're not removing the language. That was about 8 years ago, so I don't think we're going to see them back anytime soon. But we do have teachers that use those documents, and they'll come to us and say, hey, why are we talking about it here? And well, that's because they would not let us take it out. We as educators know what that does to you in the classroom. I couldn't make the argument with our research people to take it out, but that's why it's there. Good question, Ruth. Thank you. So how many of your students are using the GED app? GED and Me, are you aware of any of them? You might want to ask, because if you were at the summer conference or you've seen any of the information on it, that is another tool or resource that can be helpful to you because they can set up their own communities, and there is a way for you to connect with your students through GED and Me, through the mobile app. It is another way that you can connect with students. And so, Liz, I'm not the greatest in depth on that. I don't know if you know a little more about the app than I've just shared, but any insights are welcome.
If you want to go off sharing, I can show a few slides that I've got on that.
Okay, let me go. I'm going to stop.
And I do have to admit that I am less than well versed.
It's not our bailiwick. We don't have to be that well versed in it. Yeah.
Well, and that it's one of those things that's fairly new, and I just haven't sunk into it yet. So this is Sid, who is the little character that is the mainstay in the mobile app. And the challenge was to create a companion guide and just help GED learners throughout their journey. What the idea was is they were realizing that the younger test takers want something like this that they can interact with, and we wanted a way to interact with them as well, just to keep them excited and motivated is really the idea behind that. And you can download it, GED and Me. It's only on Apple right now, but I believe Android is coming the first of the year. Is that right, Debbie?
Yes, I think in the first quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
They did do some research with students and made tweaks based on their opinions of how it worked and things that they could do better. But I'm just going to run through these just so you get a little idea of what it looks like. I guess that's all I've got on this. So I think there's some practice questions, things like that are out there as well.
I think they get some practice questions per day. Yeah, at least.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's every day there's a new practice question in some area. Yeah.
So that would be good. Just to pique interest is really the idea. Have a little fun element that goes along with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's next?
You know, I'm interested in hearing both from Liz and Debbie, but also from all of you. Are you using those video resources that Debbie highlighted? The computer-based testing, the calculator tutorial, those kinds of things. And if you're doing that, when are you doing that with your students? I'm just curious to know, I guess, from my own knowledge.
And I'm going to share again and show you where those are located. So let me get back to.
You're good. We see the tutorials.
Yeah, I just need to get that so I can get back to the homepage to show you exactly
Mhm.
how to get in. So this educator and admins tab, that's your best friend. If you don't take anything away from today other than, oh, everything's housed under GED.com. And I click on this blue educator and admins tab. It gets a little confusing because the login and the sign up is here. Nothing is needed. You just click here and then all your resources are here. And so this one is educators. So that's going to be your main tab. And then there, you can either access them through these links here, or if you click on that first one, then the three main are right here. Free classroom materials are things you would actually use with students. And then teaching resources are aimed at you all as instructors. And then the PD also is aimed at you as instructors. So if we go into that free classroom materials, that's where those are housed. And then you can view now, they are also in a student's account. They have access to those under, is it study, I believe.
Yeah,
And
it's
then-
under study whenever they go
Yeah.
in.
And then the computer tutorial is there, or preview the test is what it's called. And so those are available. Please, 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 please use those. If
Yeah.
you're not already. As Debbie alluded to, it makes all the difference in the world if they feel comfortable going into the test. And anything like that, if they know what the test environment is going to look like and how to interact with it. There's the ability to flag a question, test taking tip 101 is don't spend too long on any one question. And so answer it, flag it, and then there's a navigator under there that allows them to click that at the end if they have time left, and then it will bring up this page and it shows any flags that they have. They click the flag, it takes them straight to that question. It's a beautiful tool and it's so underutilized, and it really will help their scores and their anxiety about, oh gosh, I don't know if that's right or not, and the willingness to go ahead and move on to the next question and not run out of time. So, and obviously the calculator tutorial, every calculator is different. They need to know that this, how to work this particular calculator and not spend a lot of time wasting on that.
Liz, one of the things when you were showing them to click on the educator and administrator tab, do all of you understand that the tab underneath that, the login or the sign up, that is for the students? And all of you should have your own student account. Just putting in teacher or administrator would take care of, then we know you're a teacher wanting to see what the students can find, and they won't follow up with you on other things. But I think it's really important sometimes to go see what it looks like for students as you're putting things, looking for items and appearances.
Use that as your last name.
Yeah.
So mine is candidate. I was always told to use the word candidate. So I'm Liz Candidate as my fictitious student account. And we really do want you to have that, because how can you guide your students in creating accounts if you haven't gone through those steps and seen what that feels like as well. And I have free GED ready vouchers for anyone who wants to reach out to me and request those to take at least one of the tests, and just let me know how many vouchers you want. If you're a math specialist, just, grab a voucher and take that math test. Nobody will have to see that. I had somebody in Arizona take me up on that, and she said, I told my students I was going to do that. And so now they're excited and ready to see how I do.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, and then you're getting that whole feel of that test anxiety, the whole bit, because they kind of up the ante on you. So I think that's fun. But you could do it in private and nobody even needs to know.
We encourage all of our new teachers to take at least one
Good.
GED Ready practice
Oh,
test.
good.
So important to
Perfect.
understand.
Perfect.
And I think it's good for us to feel that little anxiety.
It is.
My
It
favorite
is.
story about the 2014 test was, we had the vouchers and it was a quiet day in the office and I was kind of the only one here. And I thought, well, I'll go in and I'll take one. And I picked science and I said, I was doing okay. And the first chemistry question came up and I just started to sweat. I hadn't done chemistry since I was 16 years old. So it's good for us to remember that. Ruth had put a question in the chat. She said, I need to take the test to become a test administrator. Where do I find the resources to help me with that?
Oh, that's a good one. So basically that is all on the Pearson VUE side. And so if you'll just reach out to me, I will get you in touch with that group. And so you guys already have a test site set up correctly or correct? Is that Ruth?
Yeah.
You already have a test site?
Yeah, she's having trouble with her connection.
Oh, that's
I
right.
can see that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to assume you have a test site set up and maybe there had been a test administrator. If that person is still there, they can just, as soon as they log you in and put in that you're going to be a test administrator, it will kick it out to you to take the materials and to take the test. If that person is no longer there, then let me know and we'll get you set up on the backside as the person, and then it'll kick it out to you.
So if you had an existing test administrator at your site, that test administrator needs to notify Pearson VUE, and she's got the email that they have a connection to. Yeah. That person notifies Pearson VUE that they are leaving so that they will be removed as a test administrator, and they would then say, now this person is going to take my place, and they'll ask for your email, and the Pearson VUE people will start communicating with you, like Liz said, the materials and stuff needed.
Or even if they're just adding you, the same thing.
Yeah.
But they should know how to work within the Pearson VUE system to add that person. It's an additional person, not a replacement. Okay, yeah, so they just need to add you within, what is it, VSS, Debbie?
Yeah,
the acronym that we don't, it's a Pearson VUE thing.
All we'll do is say, let your current test administrator email them and tell them what you all need. And then they will figure out how they need to connect with you so that you can get started on the Pearson VUE process to be a test administrator.
And if you have any questions or any issues, then let me know. I'm always here for you as a support.
So nobody has any questions about anything to do with content on the test. I don't believe it.
Do you all know about score reports and how to utilize those and to make them individualized study guides? That's one of our best gifts that we have.
Yeah.
Those score reports are very useful.
Oh, I remember when they came out, I was in adult ed and Debbie was at one of our conferences and it's like, please help us. And, shortly after that, these came out. So I don't know if she had anything to do with it, but, we were like, we're shooting in the dark here. And those came out and it was like, because some skills that they all need to know, but you're just rolling the dice or, like throwing a dart in the dark and hoping you hit the target. And those came out and it was like, oh my gosh. So Joe needs to know these things. Karen needs to know these things. It's just beautiful. Yeah. So if you're not using them, let me know and I will make sure you know how to do that.
Well, Liz.
Yes, sir.
Given that we're recording this, and I trust that we'll have a number of colleagues and partners reference this video in the future. Maybe
Okay.
you could briefly walk us through those score
I
reports.
would love to.
I would note that Ruth also had a question about the RLA test in English, but I believe that's also available in Spanish, correct?
Mhm.
Correct.
And
Wait, I will
It-
go down and read through the chats and thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Uh,
So let's look. I'm going to simulate my fictitious student account. And before you guys get real excited about my scores, they populated my scores, so I am not going to take credit for those. You'll see when I show them to you. So when a student, from a student's account, they can access their score reports under my scores. And then they see scores here. So they click on their score report. They can adjust the score report to whatever materials you will all use in your classroom. And so if it's print materials, let's say you guys use the big blue Kaplan book, then what that does, that it shows the exact page numbers based on the skills that that student did not either answer or did not answer correctly. And so those are all there. If you change it to an electronic type of software, oh, I don't want Spanish. I would not know what it says. Then it shows you the units that you would assign to that student in that software. So that's really exciting. And then the other exciting part of why I'm wanting to start with the student version of this is that if you do anything with distance education or hybrid, when they click on these, then it will change, it will populate into yours, what you see in GED Manager. So I'm going to go back to show you GED Manager real quick. Sorry, I'm just writing. And so when you look for a student, then you would see here under my math reasoning was the 165. Oops, that's the appointments. 165 that you saw under the student account that I was showing first. This icon next to the score is how you find that score report.
And the moral of that story is you're not going to break GED Manager. Don't be afraid to click and move around in it.
So, and see, and then I had just changed it to Aztec. So it's showing that Aztec piece. And I should have clicked some of these so you could see that they would have clicked off here for you. So it's really helpful in that hybrid or distance education. They can use this as their checklist within their account, and you can see their progress as they're making it. I know when we were in the classroom, we didn't use just one set of materials, that a lot of times there were certain skills that were better done in different materials. And so change that as often as you need to. Like Score Boost was really a helpful tool. Stec Vaughn was magical sometimes. So whatever works for you and whatever classroom or materials that you have, then you can interact with them here. One other thing I do want to say is keep in mind that a GED Ready is a half length test. It's only 25 questions. And so you're going, if they take the test and don't pass it, please use the official test score and the score report off of the official test, because that's going to hone in a little bit better. There's several skills per, or several questions per skill, whereas on the GED Ready may only have one. And if they guess correctly, it's not going to show up. But the likelihood of guessing correctly 2 or 3 times on an official test is less. And so it's probably going to show up at least one time in here into the score report. So just a little.
And may I add something to that?
Please. Yeah.
One of the most important things is when I do these professional development things, I'll start and say, you start with the big picture. That was the assessment guide for educators. Within that, we had the performance level descriptors and lots of other information that people forget that, if we always say work on vocabulary, well, there's a glossary of terms in every one of those guides. But you've got the performance level descriptors. And John, thank you for asking about the high impact indicators. That hasn't changed. But as a teaching tool, you're going to use the assessment guide to know what to teach. Also the performance level indicators to know what to teach. Then you do the practice test and you look at that score report. And then they're going to take the actual test. You get another score report. When you put those two score reports side by side, that's when you're going to figure out. This is what I think is great when you're trying to figure out how to guide instruction in a classroom, when you have a lot of people. If you have several of those students' score reports, you open them up, flip them side to side, you see they're all missing the same concept. That helps you know what you need to do further instruction on. If you're dealing with a student and you put his ready score and his exam score side to side, especially if they're scoring in the 141s, 42s, 43s, and thereabout, if you take the time to compare score reports, if you have to compare, you'll pick up 2 or 3 concepts that they miss both times. And they'll miss a lot of other stuff that you may not see on both study guides. I'm going to start with the 2 or 3 concepts that they missed both times, because if I can get that drilled in, somebody who's making a 142, 143, if I get those concepts cleared up, chances are they're going to pass the test. And I have limited the amount of reinforcement time or restudying time I have to do. Nothing is more frustrating to a student than have to come in and think they're sitting through the whole math course again, when they really probably only have to study 2 or 3 skills to get the rest of what they need. So I just think it's the most important teaching and instructional resource we have out there.
And so Debbie, I'll add, some of our teachers have started identifying information from those score reports.
Yes.
Popping them into an AI tool and asking them to determine what commonalities there are so that they can create a study plan for their class. So, if you've got great students together, what are they all missing, so that I can really target for this class and get everybody the skills that they're missing, and hit the most in need skills.
That's wonderful to hear. We as an organization are focusing so much on the positives of AI and how can it help us. I'm going to share that with Ann Evers, our research person, because one of the gals that did a session for us at the summer conference, Vi Hawes, she's going to do a special session on AI during our Tuesdays for Teachers. I'm not sure if she's going to do it in November or February, but at any rate, these are good things for us to hear. I'm sure Liz can share that with Ann, and so can I. So good to know.
And I would anybody who wants to try it, just make sure you remove that student identifying information first, because AI is almost all public domain. So don't let student names and numbers out there. But everything else is good.
Good to know. Good to know.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go back and try to read anything in the chat.
Yeah, so Becky Backus had a question related to the timing of the GED Ready administrations. And I had shared that Crosswalk, the TABE HSE concordance, as a reference, whereby, certain TABE scores could be that gatekeeper to a GED Ready. But of course, local programs and teacher prerogative, expertise, and latitude are really important. So I'd like to explore that question, but I have a companion question that we've been wrestling with for quite some time, probably a perennial question, with the GED ready and its fairly effective ability to determine readiness. I know a lot of our staff build in a margin of error. Students travel, perhaps,
Yeah.
high stakes testing, test anxiety, just a whole host
Mhm.
of reasons why we want to assure that we, measure twice, cut once, and posit the student for the greatest chances of success at that first test taking. So, for conversation's sake, what do you think about a 148 on the GED ready as a
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. I used to have my students hit a 150. And then I still had some not quite make it, but I had less at a 150. But that was just what we did in our practice. So I say definitely over 145. And I think the value of the GED Ready is that it mimics the actual test environment with like drag and drop and things that TABE's not going to get them the comfort level with the GED test that the GED Ready does, and you get the score report. So those are my two plugs for the GED Ready, using it. And I actually, put in a plug in my program to get it for part of my curriculum budget, because I had a great curriculum budget, had nothing for testing because of WEO funding. And so I said, well, but it's informing my instruction, and it's so when my director finally said, you're right, it does inform instruction, so use it as a tool for curriculum, then we could get it paid for. So just my
Yeah.
plug on that one.
I need us to go back to a couple of things, and we want to make sure when we make those comments, I can talk from my personal experience, but I can't talk for GED testing services making those recommendations,
Yes.
okay? Because GED will not make any recommendations about what score over a 145 someone would recommend. So if you hear us say that stuff, that's personal opinion. And we don't have anything from the testing service that says, a 148 would be a good score and a more solid score. The testing company says you score 145, you're likely to pass, as it says. Honest to goodness, if you look at the numbers, it says from 134 to something. Now, none of us know as teachers we'd use a 134. I asked Marty Kay, why do we say that? And he said, because 50% of the people who scored at 134 then went on to take the test, passed it. So why should we cut out possibly 50% who could pass? So it is very judgmental, and we err on the side. But I just want to make sure all of these things we're talking about are anecdotal, personal opinions that the testing service does not list any of these things, and we don't stand by it. I also want to tell you that concordance study, I'm not sure that we participated in that, John, and I'll tell you why. Because at the time, TABE was a competitor with a different test out, unless I am incorrect, and I could be incorrect. If you're going to do a true concordance study, as we had done with TABE in years past, when it was just, the diagnostic test, they could get our wireframes and the really important information that we had on there. But we could not share that with them for a concordance study on this because they were a competitor. And so, a little bit of care, and you're right, there's a great deal of difference, and so is Liz, a great deal of difference in concordance in a thing that is strictly a multiple choice versus the technology enhanced items and things like that. So I'd be very careful about alignment too, and trying to make some changes that way, make some decisions based on that study. So
Good point.
Debbie, I appreciate those caveats. Those are important. And
yeah.
And in a dialogue like this, it's worthwhile to underscore those, but then I hope to also have some of those anecdotal and to feel validated or
Oh,
corroborated
sure. Yeah.
in terms of of those efforts at the local level.
Mhm.
Are you referencing in terms of that effort, is that when DRC had its own high school equivalency product task?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. Yeah, when
Understood.
it was a task,
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, I don't mind saying it. It was, at that time it was McGraw-Hill, then it was, then it was this group. But at any rate, when they were preparing the task, we could not share with them the kind of detail for a concordance study. We tell people now we have a concordance study with CASAS because they were not a competitor. But we couldn't do the same thing at the time these studies were going on with the task because of the task, with the group. So
And really the adult ed instructors and administrators and support staff since the 2014 series, we're well aware of, being a TABE state or a TABE
Yeah.
program, TABE
Yeah.
centric, where they align to college and career readiness standards rather than our high school equivalency. So
Mhm.
we're always just sort of endeavoring to find crosswalks where we can. But
Yeah.
again, the reliability of the GED Ready, and I'm certainly not a shill for the company, but
No,
it's a
I understand.
foundational
Yeah.
instructional tool for our programs. It really is.
It is the best. It is the best identifier for readiness. And I know there are some others. I know we had one of our vendors, and I won't discuss, per se, but the same thing had, if you've got a practice test of some sort, and it came to pass that it wound up that practice test was so much harder. And, people were they were saying, long story short, because they did not have access to all of the makeups of the test, they wound up with a practice test that was probably far more difficult than our GED Ready practice test. So people were very frustrated, Those are the things you learn, though. That was a vendor that we had a partnership with. We could work with them and talk about it. So it's just a fact of business sometimes, But I see Becky asked a question. When do you recommend that our students take the GED Ready test? It was always intended in 2014 that the GED Ready test be like the capstone. In other words, it is not meant to be a diagnostic test like the TABE to figure out where you are so you know what to study. That's not the point of it. It is to assess readiness for the exam. So that being said, sort of like when I was in teaching, we had our little benchmarks that we would use along the way. And I know some people used to take performance levels 1 and 2 of the performance level descriptors. And when they could see that they had checked off, folks could do the majority of those things, they would go, okay, now let's take the test and see how you do. That would be to me, the best recommendation when you've got your internal benchmarks along the way that show the student is progressing in performance level 1 and level 2. And of course, level 1 is not passing, but you have to know those skills to move along to performance level 2 for high school equivalency. And then that test will tell you your readiness to take the exam. You don't want somebody using the GED Ready early on as a diagnostic. That's not what it was intended for. You have a diagnostic, you have the TABE test, and that is how you take where they are, align it to the skills they need in the performance indicators. And John, I'll go back to you and say thank you for saying, and I would start with the 5 or 6 skills that we consider high impact indicators, because when you're working on those skills, they are transferable across all 4 content areas. And when you've done the work and they're making progress in the performance indicators that you can see in a nice list, then get ready and take that practice test. That way, they are not being introduced to that test so many times, taking it over and over and over, that muscle memory can become a problem, and they're going to get they're gonna look to be ready and maybe not be ready. So that's a long way around the horn, but I hope that doesn't deflate any current practices, but you asked for a recommendation, and I know that is what we as a company would recommend. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And we're still recalibrating to Octave's changes in June, considering high school equivalency. In this case, of course, our GED subtests as measurable skill gain indicators for federal reporting and the effects it has on our data. So,
Yes.
and if I might wax nostalgic just a little bit, and I invite Kim and Becky, and if that's Jennifer Keys, to correct me or provide some other context. I mean, I just think about how far we've come. I was trained by Barb Unruh in the paper pencil delivery, and where we had to secure it. And when we would travel to West River, we could, we had to bring those locked suitcases with us at all times, and just how far we've come in the last decade.
Those days.
And, but back then we had the OPT, right? The official practice test, and we had the ability, students could use their strengths in one subject area, 1 of 5, to maybe offset their score because they were averaged. But I guess where I'm getting is one difference is that pre-digital, everyone had to come, whether they were homeschool or whatever their situation, walk-ins outside of our adult ed programming, they had to come to an adult ed provider to take that official practice test to enter or to be ready for GED testing. And it gave us an opportunity to market our adult education services. And now with so much that can be done at home, online, in the comfort of one's home, etc., what's your sense nationwide of how programs have done in dealing with these almost profound changes of interaction and engagement?
Well, I can wax nostalgic too, because I came aboard before Barb Unruh was here. So I was around as one of her mentors years ago.
I recall. I sat next to Barb for years and years. Yes.
I know. That's why I see a few of you on here, Becky and you, and a couple of others who I recognize. I have been in South Dakota quite some time, and I have been back in the early years, did some of your conferences and things. So yeah, I guess in the big picture, John, what I see is, yes, we are a little more distant from our students, and they may not be in our programs per se, but I hold on to this to think we are in a better place, because I know now that our national average for passing a more difficult test than we had in the 2002 series is 3 points higher than we ever got as a national average in the old paper test, which was a far less rigorous test. So the encouraging thing to me is we are holding our students to higher expectations, and we always understood that if we expect it, they will deliver, and they have. I believe I think honestly, my feeling in dealing with stuff is we are so much more connected to students, even though it can be as much online and virtual than we ever were, because there were people that we were never going to see because they weren't coming into our classrooms. So I think that's been the benefit, the larger numbers of people participating. And we always knew that 50% in most states across the country, 50% of the people who took the test never came into our adult ed center. I think through the virtual option, we are having more interaction with more students than we had in the old paper and pencil days, because some of those 50% walk-ins now are engaging, with our, that used to be the 50% walk-ins are now engaging with our folks, through virtual or online. So I'm kind of encouraged by it, but I'm like you, I go from the horse and buggy days to now. So
Thank you for that retrospect.
yeah. Well, guys, I've enjoyed this conversation and walked down memory lane, but I also want to be respectful of your time. And I know Liz had to drop off to get on another call. You know how to reach both of us. Happy to engage in phone calls or conversations, and good to reconnect with some friends I haven't seen in a while, because doing PD, you may be somewhere, but I don't always get to see you with the lines that we have on. So Kim, I'm going to see if you have anything you need to close up or any other questions. You're on mute.
Sorry. I'm
No,
having-
I do it all the time. Yeah.
Um, we're good on chat, and I would thank you ladies for spending some time with us today. Thank you.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, everyone.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, Debbie. Take care.
Uh-huh. Bye-bye.
Bye.